Now, Anathema is one of these unique bands that really evolved their sound throughout their career. Now, this is something that I, of course, really tend to cater to with certain bands, and I really plead for them to do that. However, bands like Anathema and Paradise Lost and even Sentence did this in almost a complete 180 format. Catatonia could also really be placed into this mix as well. These are bands that really started off as one particular genre of music and then evolved into another, whether it be because of a personnel change, something that happened within the band, or just because that's the direction that they wanted to take. Something that really creates a very unique duality for a particular act. Almost like you have two different sides or two different Jekyll and Hyde type things, type situation going on with a particular band. Now, the Jekyll and Hyde that you get with Anathema, with their original early 1990s work, is that it's very doomy, it's very deathy, it has more of a resemblance to a doom metal or a death metal. In fact, the very first tour that they really went out on after the release of one of their original first albums or EPs was with Cannibal Corpse, which is really kind of something you would not expect if you've only heard of Anathema within the past, say 10 years. Now, because of a lineup change, because their original lead singer left and was replaced by their guitar player on Eternity, the band started to shy away a little bit from that and instead adapted more of an atmospheric and experimental sound. The doominess was still there for Eternity, but then with Alternative 4 and Judgment, it was completely changed over to what a lot of people would consider to be alternative metal or simply progressive rock. Personally, I like the progressive rock moniker a lot better because alternative metal tends to be a little bit vague. A lot of times alternative metal sometimes is actually avant-garde, either that or is usually used for bands that really are more of in the alternative music vein that just seem to have a harder edge. A good example of this being Coheed and Cambria or the Mars Volta. Now, with the 2000s album, I would definitely consider it more to be experimental progressive rock. Something where the evolution kind of came completely full circle, and you can definitely see the musical evolution to this particular point. Now, the album in which Anathema was slated to release was supposed to come out a couple of years ago. It's actually been around 7 years since the release of their last album, A Natural Disaster, which is definitely along the same lines as the album that you get here in 2010, but at the same time is a little bit different as well. There's a couple songs on A Natural Disaster that really boast huge experimental properties, which is really good, including, of course, the atmospheric Are You There? But at the same time, it also had a little bit more of a harder edge to it at certain points. 1,000 meters per second, if I remember the title correctly, is a damn good example of this. Now, the album that they released here in 2010 was originally supposed to be called Horizons. This was the working title for the album for many years, and this album actually should have came out, well, as I said, a couple of years ago. But all sorts of delays and different things going on, and not to mention them shopping for another record label before finally settling with K-Scope, really produced a bit of a problematic situation where this album was delayed. In fact, because of that, the title became We're Here Because We're Here, an album title that seems kind of redundant, but it does have a point. The title was actually taken from a song of the same name that was sung in the Allied trenches during World War I. So, in reality, they really dug up something very unique from the past in order to create an album that has a title that seems redundant but actually has a unique power. Now, this particular album is almost 60 minutes in length. It's only about 58:10, I do believe. 58:02, in fact, I'm sorry. And it has 10 tracks. Now, there's something about this album that is going to immediately have me excited. And I'm going to see if I can't show this to you. You can barely see the name right there because, well, let's face it, doing this in front of a computer with a camera is, well, really stupid. But the name that you would see there, if it was clear, is Steven Wilson. This album was mixed by Steven Wilson while being produced by the band itself. Now, this 10-track affair is definitely right along the lines of progressive rock music, and Steven Wilson's touch is definitely in and around this album. Now, like my Orphan Land review from earlier this year for their album The Never-Ending Way of Or Warrior, I'm not necessarily saying that Steven Wilson had his dick all up in this fucking album. No, I'm not saying that. Steven Wilson as a mixer is simply mixing this album down after everything's been recorded. And it may give them a little bit of direction if need be, or if something just sounds, well, not right. But in reality, this was completely produced by the band themselves, so the unique presence that you feel on this album that almost has sort of a Porcupine Tree vein to it Well, that's mostly going to be because of Anathema, as opposed to being because of Steven Wilson. Well, hey, what can I say? A lot of things that Steven Wilson touches seems to turn to gold. This is another album that definitely boasts that point. The Never-Ending Way of a Warrior by Orphan Land, amazing album for this year, definitely a qualifier for Album of the Year. And then, of course, don't forget his work with Opeth a number of years ago with the Damnation review. So, what do we have on this particular album? We have 10 tracks. The titles include Thin Air, Summer Night Horizon, Dreaming Light, Everything, Angels Walk Among Us, Presence, A Simple Mistake, Get Off, Get Out, Universal, and Hindsight. And what you're going to get with this album, as I'm not really going to go track by track and give you specifics, is you're going to get a very dreamy atmosphere. One thing that I've noticed with Anathema's more recent output is that they definitely have this particular area of their music down. The sound is going to sound extremely dreamy, and it's going to have a very unique layer to it where it's going to sound like you're floating on a bit of a cloud. However, at the same time, they have this other element to their music, the sort of like the Mr. Hyde side of this particular mix, or the Dr. Jekyll, whichever way you want to really call it, where that same cloud kind of turns gray, either that or becomes a steaming pile of hell. It's amazing how they're able to put these two together and create very desolate atmospheres that are very depressing, while at the same time, the music itself seems semi-uplifting. Seems that way, but whenever you combine it with the lyrics, whenever you combine it to the tone of the voice, and whenever you put everything together, it really has a very desolate feeling. You can probably remember on some Catatonia releases, not to mention the song Unfurl. Unfurl had a very unique sound to it with the fact that it was kind of slow, it was, well, kind of dark and gloomy, but at the same time, you really wouldn't expect it to be as dark and depressing as it really was. That's something that Anathema is able to do kind of in the same vein. They kind of make something out of nothing in the way that the music is not exactly ridiculously complex. It's not something that's very difficult to do, but instead they use atmosphere in order to create their particular feeling, their particular emotion is conveyed through it, which is something that's extremely difficult to do, and you only see it typically in heavy metal. I know, we just called it progressive rock, and now I'm saying the phrase heavy metal. As the genre as a whole has a long-standing history of doing this. A very unique facet of information that you guys may want to know is the fact that on the song Angels Walk Among Us, which was released as a single as far back as 2007, Vil Vallo of the band Him actually recorded vocals for this song, which marks the first time that I've ever heard of Vil Vallo doing anything with a metal band such as Anathema. Something that was completely unexpected, but at the same time you could kind of see it coming. Mostly because the bands do share some similar properties. Although I will say that I do enjoy Anathema's work a whole hell of a lot more than Hymn's. Maybe their old output, but hey, we'll get to that in a future album review probably. Overall, this album boasts a very strong character, and for it being 7 years since the release of A Natural Disaster, the band definitely had to make their presence felt in the metal waves in order to really recapture the fact that they are one of the classics of the genre. Progressive rock is definitely a very easy genre to get lumped into if you're playing progressive music that doesn't boast that same metal dream theater like edge, but it's a really difficult genre to be a standout stalwart in, and Anathema has really made this their baby over the past 15 years. So the fact that this album came out and was so good could be one part due to the collaboration with Steven Wilson, but I'm going to actually say that it's mostly because Anathema just knows how to make damn good music. And it's something that you're definitely going to see on this album. Consider some of the song titles once again. Summer Night Horizon, Dreaming Light, Angels Walk Among Us. They sound uplifting, don't they? But whenever you hear the atmosphere that sounds extremely desolate, you're almost taken aback. You almost go in there thinking that you're going to see one thing, but instead you get another. It's a very unique situation, and the result is almost downright depressingly romantic. And that's something that Anathema is able to do. They're able to depress you to the fact that you, or to the point, should I say, that you just want to bawl like a little bitch. But at any rate, guys, Anathema's We're Here Because We're Here is definitely a triumphant comeback for this group. It's definitely something that's going to maybe make a threat for the top 20 for 2010, but we'll see exactly where it lasts, or where it ends up, should I say. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, we'll get back to the anger soon. I'm Cover Killer. You're watching Cover Killer Nation. Anathema's We're Here Because We're Here is out now. Go pick it up.